Hey everybody. Hopefully you can hear me now. Sorry, I had a little bit of technical difficulty, but I think we got it figured out. Cool. All right, well, we're going to get started. Greetings, everyone. So my name's Scott, and I'm going to be your doodle guide for today's session. We're going to be learning about atoms. So I'm going to go through a couple slides, and then I'm also going to be doodling. And if you have a pen, whether it's a start, a create plus, want you to join in and doodle along with me as well, that'd be great. If you don't, you can always take what we're learning and apply it and make your own atoms by using some other sorts of household goods that you may have around. So quick agenda, we're going to go over, kind of the objective of the lesson and then what materials you'll need, and then we're going to get right into doodling. As part of this lesson, I want to make sure that we cover really what the structure of an atom is, and so that each of you, have a little bit better idea of what an atom looks like and just the different components of it. We're going to use Rutherford's model, which you'll see here in the corner. And you'll see it's basically, there's a central part of it, which is the nucleus, and that is going to be comprised of neutrons and protons. And then surrounding that in orbits are going to be electrons, and those are circling the nucleus in electron orbits is what they are. And so a great way to think about protons, neutrons, electrons, negative charge, protons, positive charge, so P for positive, and then the neutrons are neutral, so neutral charge is usually what I usually equate it to. So we're going to use that as kind of the basis for what we're going to be doing today. So what you're going to need is you'll need a 3D printing pen, some filament, and then also paper and maybe a pen or a pencil if you have it laying around. So I'm going to be using today the Create Plus, the 3D Create Plus. If you have a start, feel free to use that as well. Totally okay. You can use either. This lesson is okay with both. If you are going to be using the Create Plus pen, though, what I would recommend is that you're going to use either ABS or PLA filament. You could try to use Flexi, but it's not going to necessarily be as structurally I guess sound, or it won't be as solid as what the PLA or the ABS will be. So I'd probably just recommend use one or the other as you're going to be doing this activity. And just make sure that as we're starting that your pen is on. And then so like if you have a start, you'll see right here, green light means you're good to go. And then when you're using the Create Plus, you're going to see it'll flip over from red to green if you're using PLA. And then so I'm ready to doodle now because it just flipped over. It's heated up. If you're using ABS, you'll see it's going to go from red to blue. So please just keep that in mind as well. Once you are ready, your pen's heated up, ready to go, we can dive in and actually start with the actual lesson itself. What we're going to do is start with that central part of the atom itself. So that was the nucleus, and like I said, it's made up of protons and neutrons. So usually when you see like an atom itself, what it's going to be is the protons and neutrons together are going to be combined to make that kind of central mass area. To make it a little bit easier for us to doodle it, what we're going to do is we're going to make a central sphere that we're going to put actual protons and neutrons on. So we're going to doodle the sphere, and then we're going to doodle the protons and neutrons on that to put it all together. And so to start by doing this, what we're going to need to do is actually create that central sphere. And the easiest way to do that is going to be by creating a circle and then putting a line through it, and then creating about 6 half circles. Or I like to think of them also as like uppercase letter D's is the same type of thing. And we're going to weld all those together with our pens, and then we're going to cover it with more filament, and it'll make this nice sphere, which you're going to see here in the corner. And I actually have made one just for you to check out right there. That's just an example of what eventually we'll be making. And you'll see it's not perfect. It doesn't have to be perfect because we're going to be covering up with protons and neutrons. So Don't worry if you can't make a perfect sphere or a perfect circle. That's not as important as just kind of going along and actually making it. So I'm going to flip over here and actually start doing some of the doodling itself. So this is my workspace right here. So we're going to start with drawing the circle. Now, the circle itself, what you can do is either you can simply draw on a surface, just do a circle that you want, or if you wanted to take a piece of paper and draw out a circle on that and then trace over it, that's totally okay as well. It's really up to you and what you're thinking would be best for yourself and what is easier. I'm using one of our doodle pads here, which is right in front of me, and I'm going to put in a strand of PLA into my pen. And actually this doodle pad actually has some of our circles already on it, so I'm going to use that as kind of my guide, and I'm going to start my pen, and then we're going to get rolling with actually doing some of the doodling here. And I'm going to show you a neat trick that you can use as we continue on with this for the start, once we kind of get going a little bit more. And so, like I said, I just put the strand of filament in. You'll see it's actually going, and it's drawing it in right there, and it's just starting to come out right now. And so I'm just making this quick circle around here. And like I said, doesn't have to be perfect in terms of the circle, and it doesn't have to be very thick or very big either. And then what I'm going to do is that once I've actually created that circle with a line through it, I'm going to start making those half circles. And you're going to want to make about 6 or so of those. And what I would say is that try to do them about the same size if you can, because you're going to be attaching them to that circle that we just created itself. So, and you'll see I'm not going to go and I'm not going to do it too incredibly accurately in terms of like, putting a ton of filament on there. I'm just doing really just one swipe over it as I'm continuing. And then, like I said, I'm just going to make 6 of these relatively quick. And I'm using the grid lines here as a good measurement tool. So I'm basically just doing 2 squares on the grid lines. And that's going to give me the same size as what I did with my original circle, which is up here. And then once I'm done actually creating these 6 half circles, I'm going to just peel them off of the doodle pad that I have right here, much like this. So I've just peeled it off, and now I have my half circle right there. And so what you'll see is that actually when you start doing this itself, is that I've made actually a couple of these just kind of in advance. It's basically all the same thing. And then all you really have to do is that once you've created it, is take your pen and go ahead and, like I said, take these off first. I'm going to make sure I do that because I want to have these ready to go so that I can quickly attach them onto the half circle, or sorry, the full circle that I made with the line through it. And you'll see some of these are going to stick a little bit more, and like this one, it did break a little bit, but I'm not really too concerned about that because we're going to be covering over it, much like I showed you earlier with this. So you'll see it's not as important to have everything perfect as it is just to have it kind of done. And so what I'll do now is that I'm actually going to take my pen and just put another quick line of filament, or I can do a dot or two of filament on that half circle with a line through it so that I can quickly attach the other half circles that I've made to it. So you'll see what I did is I just drew some filament right there, and then I just quickly attached down there. And with the PLA, you're going to notice it's going to harden in about 6 or so seconds. So it'll give you a little bit of time to put it in place and let it set. If you're using ABS for this, it's going to harden a little bit quicker. So you might have to go ahead and actually be a little bit quicker with how you put it together, or hold the pieces up to each other and actually go ahead and combine them as you're kind of doing this. So just keep that in mind. With the start pen, if you're using that instead of the create, the time for the filament there to harden is going to be about 10 or so seconds, so you have plenty of time to attach it and to put it on there as well. So, and you'll see I'm just kind of going around just in an orderly fashion here on the actual this circle that I made. I'm just putting together all of the different pieces that I doodled out onto this so that they're sticking, and so that as I'm going across, what you're seeing is that there's actually going to be, I'm quite literally making like almost like a sphere right here in itself. And then I'm gonna, once I get done attaching all of them, then we're gonna draw all around it just so that we have it all kind of completed. So yeah, and I am almost done here. And then once we're done with this, then I'll go ahead and I'll put that one in there. Voila. So, like I said, not perfect, but doesn't need to be, because we're going to go, after this point, we're going to start putting it together and actually drawing around this actual little object that I made. It almost looks like a sphere. It kind of is, and so it's got different pieces on it. So what's the next step now with this is that you're actually going to go and take your pen and then actually start going and drawing around this piece that you've already created. So quite literally just take your filament and start going across and around it and covering it up. And you'll see I'm not going in any really specific order or direction. I'm just trying to make sure that it's covered. Because what I'm going to do is that as I continue doing this, is that eventually it's going to fill in, and I'm going to have a nice surface where then I can doodle my protons and my neutrons directly onto. So this is really the starting point of what we've made in terms of it. And this is another example of what it's going to turn into. Is I made a different one with, like I said, same type of design, and I just use a different color filament on there to make it. And so I'm actually going to, I'm not going to sit there and fill this in all right now. It's going to take a little while. I'm going to use this as kind of our next step, just to show you what's going to happen. And I can show you here, here's another one I made too, is that this actually has a starting point with the protons or neutrons on it, depending on whichever one you wanted. So I've made two of the same ones, just slightly different. And so there was a question there of what pen I'm using. I'm using the Create Plus right now, but you can also use the Start. Feel free to use either of them right now. So the next part of this project, and I'm going to show you this, is up here, is actually going to be the neutrons and the protons putting on there. There's a cool trick, like I said, you can do with the Start pen, and then there's also a different way that you can do it with your Create Plus pen. So let me show you kind of the difference. So with the Create Plus pen, so I have my nucleus all done. I'm going to go and quite simply take my pen on here, and I'm going to put it up to the structure I just made, and I'm going to directly either draw in a circle like this if I want to. That's one way that you can do it, is I can draw circles right on there and make like a structure itself. And I just ran out of filament, and I'm going to grab some more just so I have that. So that's one way. The other way is, I like to call it the blob. We can use the Blob Method, which is essentially you're going to take your pen and the filament that you put in there, and you're going to just essentially hold it right in place, right on there, and let it just continue to come out. And it's going to make a blob that's going to resemble almost like a sphere, and it'll stick directly onto this as well. So you'll see Blob Method right there, and there I made a little bit of a circle. So it's up to you how you want to go forward and do it. Feel free to do either way. Cool thing, like I said, if I took out my Start pen, and the Start, because it's low heat, nice thing is that you can start it, and you'll see there's filament coming out. I can draw directly on my skin. It's not a big deal. It's not going to harm me at all. And you can do the same thing on a surface. What's really nice about this is that the filament only hardens after about 10-15 seconds. So you can actually make little balls actually themselves, or little spheres, and right here, which I'm doing, and you could just mold them together and make your own little sphere. And then from there, once you're done creating it, all you have to do is either stick it directly on the surface you've created, the sphere you've created, that nucleus, or if you want to, just dab a little bit on there and stick it right on. That's all you got to do. It's that simple. And like I said, I'm still even molding it. If you want to make it really smooth, wet your fingers either with water or just by, a quick lick, and it'll go ahead and it will actually smooth out and to make a really nice smooth surface there. So that's probably the best way to do it with the start pen. So that's that little trick that I mentioned. I'm going to go ahead, as we're kind of showing you right now, is put a few more of either protons or neutrons. Haven't really decided which color is going to be which here. I think I'm going to make these black spheres. I think these will be the neutrons, why not? And then my protons will be this other greenish pistachio colored one. So yeah. So and it's up to you how many you want to add on here. And we're actually going to talk about what the difference is between, you know, how many, or what happens when you put on different amounts of protons and neutrons into an atom, or electrons, and what that eventually means. I'm going to get into that in a little bit, but I just want to put on some of these additional, I think neutrons is what I said they were going to be, before I kind of move ahead, just so you guys have a good idea of what this should eventually look like. So, cool. All right, I'm going to do one more just because, I don't know, it makes me feel like it needed one more over here. So that's about it. And the other thing too is that as you're doing this and you notice it, if it's starting to melt a little bit in terms of like where the surface you're putting it on, that's okay. It's going to, because the pen's hot, the filament's coming out hot, and then you're putting it on other filament. What'll happen is that as it all hardens, it'll eventually all harden back together, and it'll be structurally sound. So this same type of concept, I mean, if I doodle right on that, it's gonna feel like a little bendy, but it's gonna harden right back up, which all this is. So yeah. So now what I have created is I've created a nucleus right here, and I've got a bunch of protons and neutrons already on it. So we are done with the first part. We're going to move on to the electron orbits, which is the components that are floating around it. And so I made a sample atom before we started our session. So this is it. So these electron orbits are these right here. And you'll see that I have electrons actually sitting on the orbits themselves. So what's going to happen is that with the electron orbits, that's where the electrons themselves are going to essentially float or circle around the actual nucleus. And so the easiest way to make these is going to be either, there's really kind of two ways. One, you can straight up freehand them on your own, or two, another method that I use, and I'm going to show you right now, is going to be with actually using that paper and pencil that I showed you earlier. You could take the nucleus that you have and draw essentially a point on either side of it so that you know essentially how wide it is. And then from there, you can draw almost like an oval is what you want to do. It's like a long, skinny oval. And so I can draw half of it, and then I could draw essentially the other half. So now I have this long, kind of skinny oval that I've made on here. And what you would do then is this would essentially be the orbit that would go around here. Now you have to be careful because as you're thinking about how many you're going to put on these, maybe you want to put 2, maybe you want to put 3, 4. It's up to you. What you're going to want to do is you're going to want to go ahead and make sure that they can connect and they'll attach to this, because you will eventually need to attach these all together. So to make it easier, what I did is I just took this and I put my doodle pad over the piece of paper, and I just traced along with my pen the doodle orbits themselves. And then what you can do is then you can attach them. If you want to draw directly on a piece of paper, you can do that as well. Another thing that I found that worked for me really well is that I was able to go ahead and take some of the, or actually take this doodle pad and just turn it sideways and then make some electron orbits right out of that. It actually was a perfect size. So if you find something that is a great size for your project or for however big you made that nucleus, feel free to go and use it. I simply went and I took this doodle pad here and I put some of the filament in, and I found, I was like, hey, if I start right here and go ahead, I can actually go and I can make almost like an electron orbit that would be about the perfect size. And you'll see right now is that I'm actually using, I just put in some of the white PLA filament, so you're going to see it's going to be a little bit different color. And the thing that you want to do is that depending on how thick you want to make your orbits, it's totally up to you. You can, do one pass over, or you can do multiples. I like to go over it a few times because I wanted my orbits to be a little bit thicker. And that was just my personal preference, but it all just depends on, really what type of, what type of filament, how much filament you have, and then also, what materials you have. If you have something, let's say you had cardboard or you had something else you wanted to use as well, you could also cut out some of that and put them around here and use that. That works too. Totally up to you and what you're feeling. I did, once again, before this, I put together a few orbits as well. You'll see here. So they're roughly about the same size as what I did. So I made a few of them, and you'll see thickness-wise, I mean, I did a couple passes over it. I did about 3 or so passes over it, and it made it, about this thick or so. And you'll see about similar thickness there. So, yeah. What I'm going to do then is the next part of it is that you actually want to attach these to your actual atom that or your nucleus that you've made. And so the really easy way to do this is quite simply is either to hold it on here and just to doodle right onto it itself. So I can just hold one on here, and I can just put a dot of some filament on there and just hold it and wait till it hardens. And then you're going to want to do this a couple different times with however many orbits that you've actually made. So let me go ahead and show you kind of how that works. And there really isn't a direction that you need to worry about in terms of, which way do my orbits have to go. Don't worry about that. It's totally up to your personal preference and, what you want to see on your own atom that you're making. So let your creativity run where it might go. So, and you'll see I'm just putting a little bit of filament there. It's white, so you'll see. And then I'm going to go ahead and put a little bit more right there, and I'm going to stick them and just hold it there for a little bit. So what you'll see now is that I've put in there a little bit of filament and a little bit of filament right there. And it's not perfect, once again, doesn't have to be. And then you're going to want to go ahead and just take another orbit and really put it right over this. And you can attach it in the same spot if you want. You don't have to. I kind of want to because I know it'll make it a little bit. I know I've already kind of put something over there. I'm going to throw one over here in a different direction so it kind of looks cool. Just to make that. And then I'll show you how to do that just a second. Just want to get it. Going to get off that little bit of filament on the end of the pen before I do this. And you'll see here too is that, if you want to hold it down or you want to put it like down for a little bit too, it's not going to hurt it on the, like on the table or so. So just be careful that as you're doing this, you're not, getting it too close to yourself or burning yourself. I know there's always a lot of questions about, will, the filament burn you or so. For the Start pen, it's so low temperature, it's not going to cause any issues. But with the Create Plus, the tip is hot and the filament that comes out is hot, so you always got to be careful of that. Just make sure that you're always thinking about that as you're doing your projects. The last thing I want to do is have somebody, burn themselves. And so, and then here we go for the last orbit. I'm just going to add it in right here. I'm going to add it in. I'm going to put a little bit of filament on here, and then I'm going to add it in. And I did this a little differently, where I actually put the filament out, and then I went and I did that just because it's getting kind of crowded on the top of this. But no worries, now it's going to stick right there. And then what I'm going to do is the same thing over here on this side, is I'm going to throw a little bit of more filament on this one. And then I'm going to go ahead and attach it. And it sinks in there nicely. And then now what you have is you have a nice nucleus with a bunch of orbits on it. Looks pretty cool. So, next part of this. And I know we only got a few minutes left, so I'm going to show you this. And then we'll get you guys off to doing more awesome projects. The last part of this is going to be electrons. So the electrons are going to go actually on this orbit itself, like I showed you earlier. There's a couple different ways you can do this. One, you can roll up balls, kind of like I said with your start pen, and then actually go ahead and attach them. The other thing that you can do is actually go ahead and make little blobs actually on like a surface that you have. So I showed you guys the blob method earlier. Same type of thing. So blob method, you can make a few of these. And then from there, let me just make sure, there we go. So blob out a little bit here, and then blob out a little bit here. And then what you would do is make an even number of these, because what you're going to do is that once you're done blobbing them, you can go ahead and actually combine them together. And to make, I like to think of it almost as like, it's like a sphere, but it almost reminds me almost like a hamburger bun. That's two hamburger buns, and then you're going to have something in the center, and then you can quickly attach those. And I'll show you what I mean to that. The other option for this is going to be that you take your actual orbit that you have here, and you can doodle directly on it. Now, what I'm going to tell you is that if you're going to go this route and you're going to put something on there, keep in mind that you're not, that the actual surface that you're doodling on, this part, these orbits, are going to be a little bit thinner. So as you're heating them up again, they're going to weaken and they're going to become a little bit, I guess, they're going to look like they're almost going to melt a little bit. They're not going to melt completely, but keep that in mind. If you see it starting to twist, or if you see it starting to look like it's getting a little bit weaker, it's going to happen. It will reharden though once everything hardens back up. And especially if you were trying to put some ABS electrons onto maybe a PLA orbit, you're going to notice because ABS comes out at a little higher temperature, it's going to make the PLA melt down a little bit quicker. But like I said, it will eventually go and reharden over time. So it's kind of up to you and how you want to do this. I personally like to do it this way just because I feel like this is a great way to do it, and I can kind of see it as I'm doing it in real time. But like I said, totally up to you and your preference. And like I said, what you would want to do is that if you were making the orbits on a flat surface like this, is that you would print them, or you would actually go ahead and put them down like what I did earlier. You'd make a blob, then you would go ahead and just attach a little bit of filament to the edge of it like this, or to the end of it, and then you'd put another one on top of it. And then essentially what you've made is almost like a little bit of like a hamburger bun type thing right there. And then what you can do is go ahead and actually place this directly on one of your orbits right here, and just throw it right on there. And you'll see that you actually have another electron on here that looks very similar to some of the other ones that's on there. You won't even notice the difference. So completely up to you how you want to do it. So keep that in mind. But once you're done, and after you put as many electrons on here as you want, you'll essentially have a completed atom. And the cool thing about this is that with the atoms themselves, there's a pretty neat thing, is that you'll have something that's completely unique to your own. And the best part is that you can take the learning to the next step, is that you can learn a little bit more about what happens with the atoms themselves when you have different numbers of protons and neutrons, electrons in there. If you have too many neutrons in the actual center or the nucleus of it, then the atom itself will become a little bit unstable, and it will decay and become eventually radioactive. So that's kind of cool. So if you make something that has a lot more neutrons than protons, you have something that's radioactive. If you have something that has more electrons in here or less electrons in here than protons, so the protons and neutrons, when they're equal amount, it keeps the charge of an atom stable. If you have too many electrons or too few electrons, what's going to happen is it will actually turn into an ion, either positively or negatively charged. And so that's the cool thing, is that you can mess around with it and make something to your heart's creation and figure out, like, and then go later and look online to see what did you create. This, for instance, is a replica of carbon. This is a carbon atom, but if I added, some more electrons, to it, it'd become a positively charged carbon atom, which is pretty neat too. Or I could make it radioactive if I'm, having, a little bit of a toxic day. You never know. So yeah. So that's a little bit more about the atoms. I mean, we'd love to see what everyone will create over the next, day or so. I do want to tell everyone that we are doing a giveaway for one of our Create Plus Essentials pen sets. So take a picture of what you've created and either send it to us by tagging us on Twitter or Instagram using @3doodler, or use our hashtag 3doodler or 3doodleredu, or a combination of all those. Show us what you've created. Even if you haven't created something with a pen, you're hoping to win one, send us pictures of what you created, and we're going to pick a winner tomorrow afternoon for one of our Create Plus Essentials pen kits, which is essentially one of these. And I'm going to flip back and show you. This is the Learn from Home set that we have for Create Plus, and we also have them for our Start pens as well. So if you're looking to get a 3doodler pen, or you want to get another one, we got some great deals online on our website that you should check out. And if you're looking for more project ideas, what I would recommend is checking out our app. You can take your tablet and you can pull up projects, stencils right on there. And even if you wanted to go ahead and if you have a Start pen, you can doodle right on your tablet. It won't harm it. You can pick it right off and fill in the stencil components. Or you can put a doodle pad over it with your Create Plus and doodle right over your tablet. And it'll keep you entertained for hours. I know I use it and I love it. So feel free to check it out. But keep sending us your creations. And I appreciate everything. And I'm going to look here if there's any other questions before we go. It looks like, I don't know if we have very many questions. It looks like a lot of them were answered. Can we take scope? Our Nerf tutorial, maybe at some point. I think that was something we had talked about at one point. But yeah, it looks like there's no other questions. So looking forward to seeing what everyone has created over the next day or so. Feel free to tag us, and happy doodling. And thanks a lot for joining us today. We appreciate it. See ya.